life of a spy isn't as glamorous as I thought. But it isn't dull.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Tuesdays with Story. My name is, of course, Daniel Parker. And for those of you who don't know who I am the writer and creator on a little comic book called Angel's Awakening, which is, of course, the book you just saw the trailer for.
Successfully funded.
Successfully funded, absolutely. Currently in demand right now. So if you haven't backed this book yet, you still have some time. Fulfillment is hopefully will start in September if all goes according to plan. But of course, things can happen. But fingers crossed. We'll by September it'll start going out. So. And, of course, joining me, as always, is my partner in crime, Mr. DarthBobCat, who, of course, has another name. But go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yep. This is DarthBobCat. I write under the name DB Fastbinder, though this week I'm giving my plug over to another Indiegogo comic, Micah Curtis's ENGLEWOOD Volume 2. I strongly endorse this book. I believe in it. I read Volume 1, and I immediately wanted Volume 2. And while it didn't happen immediately, because he released a horror comic in the meantime, please help this happen because I have to see what happens next.
Yes. I wholeheartedly agree with Bobcat. This book looks amazing. The first book was really good. I want to see what happens to Carlos. Yeah.
Yep.
I want to see his face get caved in.
Yep. And if you happened to miss book 1, there's a combo pack that has issue 1 and the new volume 2 coming out a little further down. And also, if you decide you want anything else with the T-shirts, or you can be drawn in as a cop or anything else like that, you can add book 1 on as an extra tier.
Yeah, there's only one slot left to be a cop, so if you want that, get on it.
Yep. But yeah, and this book isn't political. It's just a good old-fashioned superhero revenge story, kind of scratching that Daredevil itch.
Yes.
So,
all right. Links.
Shill time is over.
Yes. So, right. So,
buy my book. Buy my book. Buy my book.
Buy his book. Buy his book. Buy his book.
Exactly. Links are in the description below, and I also put the links to Bobcat's books as well. I know he's not shilling them, but they're there. So,
all shilling is appreciated.
Yes. All right. So on to the topic of today. So we've covered a wide range of things. We've talked about world building. We've talked about characters. We've talked about subverting expectations and all that good stuff. Now we're going to talk about actually planning out the story. So Bobcat and I, we have our own ways of doing things that we're going to discuss here. So I'll let Bobcat take us away first. So,
yep. So, Daniel, in the course of writing my Magpie Wizard books, how many words do you think I've ended up discarding over the course of things?
Good question. I'm gonna say about 50,000.
200,000.
Oh.
Because the original story was my very first novel I ever actually wrote to completion, and so it was very rushed, very sloppy, and I immediately turned around to try to make a book 2 of it. This has never been released to the public, just like to select pre-readers and friends and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried 2 different attempts on book 2, and I got very far into it both times before I realized that I kind of had built it all on quicksand. So not only did I discard those 2 attempts on book 2, I also discarded about 2/3 of the original book 1, and then also I discarded an original draft of book 3. Now, do you know why this kept happening to me? Because a failure to plan is planning to fail. Or rather, a failure to have a plan that is good to actually realize is planning to fail. Because like by the first attempt at book 3 of the series, I had what I thought was a good outline for it, but I realized about halfway through, I was like, this is boring. I can just consolidate a couple of these villain characters, and that's much more interesting.
Yep.
So that, man, I mean, part of it is like I've on the one hand I regret it because of course who wouldn't? I'd be like a book 6 right now if those books had all, or if those words had all translated into books I could continue with. But I kind of see it as, it's like you go to the gym, you're not actually achieving anything when you lift a 10-pound barbell 20 times, but you're building up your muscles. It's like a lot of this is building up your writing muscles. So I'm willing to take it as exercise there. So now there are a few approaches to writing that don't actually involve much planning at all that I see people use successfully.
Yes.
And I'm going to talk. We're going to talk about those real briefly, just because. So for those who don't know, I have people who work heavily in the serial writing community, not like the boxes of corn pops, but serial as in serial killer. And that's how I released MAGPIE Wizard primarily. What you're doing there is you're writing week to week. You don't have a lot of time to go back and fix things. Like you can fix things for the eventual book on Kindle, which is the final text. But let's say that you've been posting things weekly, and you realize in week 40, oh crap, I didn't. Chapter 40 is up. Oh crap! Back in chapter 5, I said that he had a hand missing, but in chapter 40, I need him to have a hand missing, but in chapter 3, I described him shaking somebody's hand, and he didn't lose his hand in between then and now. Oh no! Some asshole is going to notice that.
Yes.
The type of thing that you can correct in the final draft, but when you're writing it week to week, you're out in public. So there's a few different approaches I see people take. One is just called pantsing, which is, writing by the seat of your pants. You keep track of all details as you go, and you stick with those details. There's also, and this is partially what I do, what's called flashlighting, which is basically, it's like walking through a dark corridor and you have a flash in front of you. So you're not just restricted to what's directly in front of you. You know what's happening a few chapters ahead at all times. And you're best off if you have an overall end goal. But how you get there can be kind of a mystery to you, and you can meander a bit. Now that works fine for that's good for a first draft. That's not a bad approach at all. But in my opinion, after having done a number of books in that sort of seat of your pants flashlighting style, it can lead you to some cul-de-sacs.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily recommend writing that way, particularly if you're, if you have like an ongoing series, because again, like whatever you do, like you say, because you can't go back and change something. The only, you could try to retcon it some way or do a Deus Ex Machina, but then if you do that too many times, you're going to lose the readers.
Right. Like even Star Wars got, he did kill your father from a certain point of view.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of, but only Obi-Wan, the mystical old hermit, could have gotten away with that.
You're right.
If every character was constantly retconning everything, oh, you didn't know, said Luke to Leia, I didn't actually grow up on Tatooine.
Yeah.
Well, why do you think I was so sad there? It's we moved there when I was 13.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just kind of it loses a lot of its luster.
Right, because you can't lie to the audience too often. So again, there are people I know who work extremely well, seat of their pants, and extremely well with flashlighting. I'm not going to denigrate those techniques. Again, I've employed them in certain ways myself and to mixed success. But in my opinion, if you're making something that you want to sell for money, and especially if you're not, like, I think that a lot of people I know who are really good at pantsing are people who have been writing in that style for a long time, so they're good at keeping track of the details. If you're just starting off, you're probably best off having at least some sort of outline.
Yeah. Or some type of summary or roadmap, if you will, to the story you want to tell.
Yep, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I've found is that, actually, I know I'm talking about in chat. Daniel, let's talk a little bit about Angel's Awakening. What was your process like that? Where did you start with it? How did you end up with your script? What was your outline process like? You're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yep. Oh, I think we have the same headset. Like, do you have one of those Logitech ones?
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, I have the exact same one with the exact same mute button in the exact same place. Guess how often I do that?
Yeah. I've done it a few times myself. Okay. Anyway, so Angel's Awakening, how I got there was from the next book that I have I'm getting ready to, that I'm about to get started on. And it came from creating when I was working on the backstory of Jessica Sawyer. And she, I as I was figuring out her backstory and I was tying her story into the other main character's story in the next book. And as I was doing that, I thought, that sounds like a really cool story. I want to tell that first. And so that's when I kind of set that one story aside for the time being. And then I started on Angel's Awakening. And where I went from there was I just said, okay, I had a basic idea for what was going to happen in the story. And I wrote out a really, quick summary of it. And then I started saying, okay, what characters do I want to put in there? So, obviously Jessica was one. And then, I needed a villain. And so that was Sky. And then, two other characters that I had created for the other story, I brought them over. And then I, basically just kind of went from there and then, filled in any kind of dead space with some backstory that needed to be in there, and then that was basically it. And then once I got a pretty good handle of how I wanted the story to go, I just started writing the script.
Yep. So it sounds like if I can put some words in your mouth, you ended up doing a little bit of bouncing around. Like, you didn't necessarily sit down and write, here is the complete history of this world and the Britannian Empire.
Mm-hmm.
You said, okay, so it kind of sounds like you came up with the overall premise for the world. You came up with some of the events of the world that you wanted to key in on. Then you went, oh wait, okay, so here's this other event that I think is more interesting, so I'm going to go over there and focus on that a bit. And then and then it sounded like kind of like bouncing around back and forth between, like, you would add something to the series Bible when you needed a detail. You'd add something to the outline when you wanted it. You'd update the character bios.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, just kind of moving around from one thing to another, and yeah, here's Serena. So she creates an outline for each story. She has an idea of how she wants the series to end, but I don't have an outline for the entire series. It's just me writing story issue by issue, and that's actually probably yeah. She bounces around too. I would say that that's a pretty good way of approaching it. It's if you have a good idea of how you want it to end, but also at the same time, it's what's the saying? It's not it's the journey, not the destination.
Right. I can't think of a lot of series or books I've read where it was awful, 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 awful. Hey, that ending was great.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to make sure that you have the ending in mind, but it doesn't derail the middle.
Right.
So yeah, I think when you watch, if like other series I've seen, you can kind of get about the writing process. You can kind of get the idea that it's a stepwise thing. First, you world build, then you write up your characters, then you start outlining your story, then you start writing the story. When really, I think it's kind of more like a feedback loop.
Mm-hmm.
Like my original Magpie Wizard book was actually started because I just had an idea when I was sitting at work one day when it was slow, and I just opened up Word in my browser and just wrote the first 6 pages. Just like experiment with the voice and the idea. And then I said, hey, I liked writing that. That was fun. I don't know anything about the world or the details. Let's figure it out. So then that's when I went back and did some of the outline, and then I started coming up with the characters, and then I wrote a bit more, and then it was just kind of that back and forth process.
Yeah, and usually what will happen too is when you're planning the story out, there's something that you want to do or something you need to happen, but then you realize, oh wait, in the universe or in the world or or whatever, this happens, so I can't do it that way, or so I have to you either have to go and you fix the world building that you did, or you have to find a workaround.
Right, and that's where I know that a bunch of my writers' friends have a meme about how much they hate the idea of world building, just because of that reason. Because you can end up completely ossifying yourself so you can't move. So we talked about this before in the world building section, it's easy to just focus so much on the history of your world and all the peoples and everything that you realize, oh, there's no room for any actual characters in here, because that would spoil the equilibrium I've made. I've definitely been guilty of that. I remember about 15 years ago, some friends and I were working on a shared superhero novel universe, which that's a terrible idea in retrospect. Writing people, the only collaborators you should have are your editor, and if you're doing a comic book, your artist and letterer. Or if you have somebody that you work very well with, like some people are great at, are just excellent at dialogue, but aren't good at story structure. Some people are good at story structure, but aren't good at dialogue. There are some partnerships like that that work out really nicely.
Yeah.
Like another plug to do, Rob Liefeld, if you're interested in comic books, actually has a really interesting podcast. I can't say I'm the biggest fan of his actual output, but dang, is he enthusiastic about everything he talks about, and he gets some interest. And you know what? Let me go ahead and just let's see here. I'm not going to pull up the typical ones that people use to attack him, because the one Captain America one where he looks like he's just a ridiculously huge chest. That's not fair. Like that wasn't actually in a comic book.
Yeah.
Here's a good one for us. Let me go ahead and share my screen real quickish.
Yeah, the first attempts usually tend to go that way, Serena. You're not alone. That happened to me. That happened to me too.
All right, so I'm sharing my screen now. So
Yeah.
this is a pretty reasonable example of Rob Liefeld art. He did this for a cover on Cable and Deadpool in the 90s, and he helped create both characters.
Mhm.
So it's like anatomically, like I think that the big secret of Rob Liefeld is that everybody mocks his art, but his art actually does have a certain style and flair to it.
Mhm.
What he really is, though, is kind of a hack writer, in my humble opinion. But
Well,
so,
and he can't draw feet.
well, yes, there's that too. Like he like what he wants to draw, he will draw the heck out of it. Like look at all the detail in this gun. The gun kind of looks like it's made of cork there, which is strange.
Oh yeah, yeah,
But I mean, that's a cool cover. Like
yeah.
It definitely promises a bunch of action, and I understand why a whole generation of comic book readers love Liefeld.
Mhm.
But one thing he did was that he would often come up with a general outline and draw the comics, and then somebody else was responsible for figuring out the dialogue for the characters. So that's a reasonable division. But if you're making a shared universe and you got 10 of your friends in there and you're working on that together, no.
Yeah. Too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yep. Like I remember we got into, well, the story is set in the far off future of 2020. What's the power grid like? It's like nobody should have cared about that.
Yeah.
So you've got your feedback loop there, right? And remember that it always have a bias towards making the story.
Mhm.
So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a moment here to kind of set this up. So right now I'm working on a spin-off novel from my main Magpie Wizard series. Partially because I failed to plan. What was originally going to be book 3 is now long enough to be books 3 and 4 on Kindle, which it will be eventually, but that's going to be a bear to edit. But I wanted to have something to keep my patrons happy and maybe get some new readers into things. So I decided to take the most popular side character in Magpie Wizard and give her own book.
That would, of course, be Rose.
That would, of course, be Rose. Let's see here. Let me see if I can find a good... Gee, I can't imagine why she's the most popular. One sec. Let's see here.
Are you going to show the picture that I think you're going to show?
Well, that's for you to find out, isn't it? So I have here the preliminary cover.
Okay.
Drawn by the wonderful Yogurt Stripper. And
yeah, there it is.
Can't imagine why people like her so much.
Yeah.
So this idea gestated for a while. Back when I was originally working on splitting up the books, I originally had this idea of, every book is going to be a 50,000 word light novel. So what can I do there? And I had this idea that the main character, Soren, would run into Rose, who had been kidnapped by pirates. But I ended up not doing that because it seemed strange to have a wizard school. It would be like if Harry Potter didn't arrive at Hogwarts until book 2.
Mm-hmm.
Like even if he was on the road to Hogwarts in book 1, that would still seem strange. Like, wait, now it's like he did book 2, and like, wait, now it's not swashbuckling. Now it's now it's a boarding school comedy. What? And you're welcome, Serena.
Yeah.
So, but I had this idea for a long time. The connection was in my mind, like Rose and being stranded. Rose and stranded. So that's the ever so creative title here.
Mm-hmm.
So what I started off with was I went through now this is of course the advantage and disadvantage of having multiple books written in the series where I could talk about the character. So I went through and just wrote. I went through the Word docs and found most of the scenes that involved her directly, or every scene where she talked about her life up to that point, because I had kind of pantsed that as I went along. Actually, and so I was like, okay, so we know that she named these brothers in book 1, and then I realized I'd accidentally given the same number Alfred in book 1, Albert in book 3. So now there's an Alfred and an Albert, and I get to have some fun with the main character being an unattentive friend and not realizing that they were different people.
Yeah.
Up till now. It's like minor continuity errors. But thankfully, because books 3 and 4 weren't on Kindle yet, and because I doubted anybody would care, I could a character asked about a brother named Daniel. Well, I hadn't done anything with Stephen yet, so I searched and replaced Daniel for Stephen. And so I just went through and I wrote down some key scenes with the characters, copied some bits in. I wrote some details about how the world works. I wrote some details about the villain and so on. Now, where I originally started ended around here, because this is me getting caught up on things I have previously established, so then I could go deeper into it. Now, of course, I basically want this to be something that somebody could find this first and then go back into the main series. It's like, okay, what do I have to actually explain here? So I go through, it's like, okay, so here's details you have to know. And then I was like, okay, so that's things that have to come up in the first few chapters, because that's the trouble with, it's kind of the comic book problem, though not nearly as severe, because, it's like, how do I condense 4 books worth of story so that people who have been around know that I haven't forgotten what's been around, and new people aren't just turned off. So then this was like kind of the feedback loop. So then I went over to the outline. And the outline here is half summary, half first draft. Because if I came across a section where I knew that lines I wanted, if I knew I wanted a particular line set, I could write it out. If I wanted just a summary of a scene, I could put that in there, and came up with some like recurring dialogue for characters. So then as I wrote this, if I was like, okay, so I need another heroic character here. I need to define my main villain a bit more. So then I would hop on back to the series Bible to add in the details as I put them in. Yeah, it's not a particularly linear process. Now, of course, a lot of people would like look at the series Bible and go, 4 pages? Well, 5 pages. What? What about the socioeconomic history? What's the language of the demons sound like?
Yeah.
The answer is High Germanic, Old Germanic, but I spell it wrong. I just have this dictionary I look up for online that's like English to Old Germanic, and whenever I need a demon word, I just look through there and like change out like a U for an O or whatever.
Yeah, it's easy to do, Serena.
Yep. Yep, and that's where having some sort of series Bible is helpful. Just because like I really should have at some point. I never expected to make Rose the main character, and it was kind of amusing. If I only ever had the main Magpie Wizard series, I could have totally gotten away with readers wondering just how many brothers does Rose have.
Yeah.
That could have been an interesting inside joke, and like again, it would be just Soren can't keep her family apart. That was always the joke.
Yeah.
But now that I'm actually making her a focus, now I have to actually keep track of what brothers she has. So I've narrowed it down to 4.
Yeah.
Which is still a lot, but it's
yeah. Well, and that helps too, and with Magpie, because like as you said before, Soren's an unreliable narrator. So it's just like like okay, well, it's like all right, well Does she have 3 brothers? Does she have 4 brothers? I don't care.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's going to get called out on it at some
Yeah,
point.
yeah.
In this very book here, that's one of the scenes. And so I went through, I realized what existing characters I wanted to use, what existing characters I didn't want to use. So, Miss Reen, I'll get to your question in a second.
Yeah.
And then just came with my outline. And then just to make sure that, well, here's this nice wallpaper. If any of you know me around, I can give you a link to it anytime you like.
Yeah.
And then just to experiment with the character's voice, I wrote this prologue, which was basically just designed to, it's half first draft, half just exploratory writing. And exploratory writing is, I mentioned earlier that I had discarded about 200,000 words. There are some professional authors who just do that as a matter of course. It's called discovery writing. I call it exploratory writing or discovery. It's discovery writing is what they call it, and that's basically where you write, then you realize that you've amassed too many contradictions, and you basically start over from scratch using your original work as a guideline. Which that's a method. It's a method I used unwillingly, but if you're going to be posting stuff weekly, it's like hey guys, and patrons, I appreciate you've been giving me $8 a month to be 4 chapters ahead, but yeah, we're just going to cut all that and enjoy starting over fresh.
Yeah. Too bad, so sad.
Yep. And it's the creative process.
Yeah.
I subverted your expectations.
Yes. Exactly. Oh, jeez.
So let's kind of double back a little bit because in defining terms here, we'll just go ahead and put that away.
Yep.
So if we look up what a series Bible is, let's see if we can find an actual definition.
The way I define it is it's basically a roadmap or a guideline, if you will, for your series. So basically where you want to, and it's like, this is like, it's got like the trajectory of where you want it to go. It's got this, where the settings, the characters, the motivations, the, different plot lines, that kind of thing.
And it'll have like little bits of the backstory that may never make it into an episode, but would tell a writer how to write a character.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's say that you had a character whose favorite aunt died when he was 6, and it scarred him horribly. You never actually have to talk about Aunt Mildred, but if you're the writer and you know that if you're writing this character and you know that he has a deep sadness inside of him because of Aunt Mildred, then that's going to affect how you write him his reaction to various things.
Mm-hmm.
And a series Bible is usually not just like a quick summary. It also has some hard and fast rules for your word or for your work. Like, and this is just an example. In the Magpie Wizard universe, wizards can't create matter out of nothing. They can make energy structures, but they can't just make matter willy-nilly. Mm-hmm. So that would be a key. That's actually a rule I came up with as I went along that I haven't added to my series Bible yet, but it's firmly in my head. I will never, unless I have an exceptionally good reason, have a wizard seeming to make matter out of nothing. And in fact, it's to the point where if I had a wizard do that, you as the reader would know that was a trick.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Just because I've always clung so closely to that rule.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there just if you just Google like writing a series Bible, I mean, you can find like just about lots of different resources for how to do it. And what I would say too, when you're writing, like if you're writing a series Bible, or if you're doing an outline, or you're plotting or planning out your story, find a method that works for you and that you're comfortable with. Because one of the things, and Bobcat and I were talking about this before we came on, like when I was in school learning creative writing, I found it was so structured and so uniform that it actually kind of, like when I was a kid, kind of killed my passion for creativity, because I wasn't following what the teacher wanted me to do, or yeah, I had to do what she was telling me to do, and I'm like, I don't want to do it that way. I just want to write the story the way I want to write it, and that can be, it can be very frustrating. So, whatever method you find, there are a bunch of different methods out there. Whichever way you find works for you, do it that way. Because ultimately, once you put the finished product out, it really doesn't matter how you did it, how you got to that point. What matters is you've got it. You've got your story.
Yep. Now, if you become a big success, then maybe you start going, I've got this 100-page series Bible I've written over the course of things. I could pretty this up and put it out as a collector's edition.
Yes.
But you've got to have like a really big success for anybody to care. Like,
Right.
If you sell 1,000 books, you probably would have 3 people who would really want the special series Bible collection.
Yeah, or of course, if you're somebody like, say, Tolkien or George R.R. Martin, you're going to have more people interested in something like that.
Right. It kind of depends on the nature of your work. And just think about how many Star Wars source books there are.
Oh, dozens, hundreds. Yeah.
I know I had them all at one point.
Yeah. So yeah, same with me and Star Trek. I had tons of Star Trek. Those, yeah.
There are a lot of these universes where there's so much thought put into the backgrounds of things, or so much made up after the fact to explain things.
Mm-hmm.
You can whichever you choose to believe.
Yeah. Yeah.
That when I hear people talk about Star Trek or Star Wars, it's more the actual people who made the things. It would tend to be more like, well, this ship is faster than that ship. And we can say it has a dromium core or whatever. And then you'd have somebody make a source book like, the dromium core was invented by the Rylothians in 15 years before the Battle of Endor.
Yeah.
So you can BS a little bit after the fact too, but that's kind of like once that's when you've hit a whole different level of success than we're dealing with here.
Yeah. You gotta start small before you go big. Yeah.
Yep. And that's where, I want you to imagine trying to write an original story with a series Bible that's 1,000 pages long. Can you imagine just having to go back and reference things?
Oh, it would take you so long to write a story, and not only that, any story you would write would be so watered down and so unimaginative. It would be just one of the dullest things anyone would ever read.
Yep. Now the other thing is, ain't nobody got time for that.
Yeah. Exactly.
That kind of series Bible, I could see some series. I could see some series developing that over time.
Mm-hmm.
Just because, say, who's that one writer who has that series of murder mysteries? So it's like 1 for the money, 2 for the show. And I was at the bookstore the other day, and they suddenly had, I realized, are they on book 30? Sheesh.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Who was that?
Janet Ivanovich.
Okay.
Yeah, let's see what book she's up to. I'm curious now.
Yeah. It's kind of like
Okay, okay, I exaggerated slightly. Sorry, guys. Book 28.
book 28. Okay, not quite 30. Not quite 30.
Yeah, but I could see her having, over the course of 20 to 30 years, having come up with enough details to keep track of that her series Bible could have hit 1,000.
Mm-hmm.
And right, Mystery, and I would just say, like, the whole series Bible thing is, this isn't designed to like scare you or anything off of having a series Bible. It's more just what it is if you establish a fact, like if you say that your main character is 16, you don't want to have her in the next issue walking up into a nightclub, getting carded and being allowed in.
Right. Unless you've established that it's
Right. Maybe that
years,
universe, the age of consent and drinking age is 16.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's like how did she get in? Oh, she has a magic driver's license that shows whatever age it's supposed to.
Right. Yeah. Like the psychic paper from Doctor Who.
Yep, exactly.
Hey, Torino. Yeah. But yeah, it's mainly a series Bible is mainly just to help you keep track of what it is you're doing with your story, and obviously keeping everything consistent, and so that you're not creating plot holes and inconsistencies with your characters.
Right. Unless you're working on a collaborative project with another writer, and the whole idea of a series Bible came about from TV series, because they have so many cooks in the kitchen.
Right.
You need to have some sort of document that everyone can go back to.
Right. Yeah. Because TV shows will change writers, almost every year,
or even episode to episode.
Yeah. Yeah. Like in the case with Star Trek: The Next Generation in the first 2 seasons.
Yeah, that sounded like it was kind of a revolving door there for a bit.
Yeah. Yeah. There was in the documentary that Shatner did, Chaos on the Bridge.
That was a good one.
Yeah, that was. Ronald D. Moore was one of the people that they interviewed, and if you don't know, Ronald D. Moore is he did he worked on Next Generation, he worked on Deep Space Nine, and he also he was on Battlestar Galactica, the remake Battlestar Galactica, and he's also on Outlander. But he talked about, like, in one of the bathrooms at the offices where they worked, there was just a list on the wall. There was a list of all the writers that had worked on that show, and it was just like taking up the whole wall.
Yeah. Thankfully, if you're working for yourself, the outline and the series Bible are just for you.
Mm-hmm.
Although, I mean, if you're a comic book artist, or if you have a consistent comic book artist, it might not be a bad idea to show them some of the character parts of the series Bible. So, like, let's just say, for example, you have it that, I don't know, Rose hates wearing a hat because she gets itchy, and her long blonde hair bunches up in it. Well, let's say that was an actual detail. Here is what our good artist buddy RKS made for how, like, RKS is great, by the way. You can throw a really vague design document at him, and he will, like, I was like, I kind of want a uniform that looks kind of like this, that, and this, and he was like, no problem, fam. Let me get at you.
Yeah.
But let's say that I had said canonically, Rose hates hats and hat-related products, and suddenly this is the military uniform she's wearing, and the dialogue has her say, I would have to go back to RKS and go, whoa, I know you've drawn 6 pages since the last time we talked, but you're going to need to go through and erase every single one of those hats.
Yeah.
He would hate me.
Yeah.
And he would be right to hate me.
Yes. Yeah.
And by the way, like a lot of series Bibles are just full of simple details like that, because it's not like a sitcom is going to have a huge elaborate lore. But you might go like, Homer Simpson loves food, not very bright, bald, heavy, mid-30s.
Hmm.
Bart, 10 years old, troublemaker, very mischievous, uses cool slang, rides a skateboard.
Yeah.
So if I'm writing if I'm like the first season of a Simpsons episode and a writer and I've never seen The Simpsons before, I can go through and go like, okay. So you don't suddenly have an episode where Bart is 13 and being pressured to try cigarettes by his high school girlfriend who has never appeared before.
Yeah. Yeah. It's it also helps in a yeah, like you said, with somebody who's doesn't know anything about a series or whatever, having something like that definitely, having a Bible would definitely help. Like, so for example, G.I. Joe Resolute. I don't know if did you ever see that?
It's just so funny. I saw that years ago, and I just picked it up at Best Buy the other day, but I haven't watched it yet. That's so random that you thought of that.
Yeah. Well, I thought of it because Warren Ellis wrote that, and he didn't know anything about G.I. Joe.
Really?
No, he didn't know a single thing. He didn't know the characters. He didn't know the lore. He didn't know anything. But that was probably one of the best G.I. Joe stories I have ever seen.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's no Ode to Cobra, but that Ode to Cobra is more of like if you have G.I. Joe on any of your streaming services, look up the episode Ode to Cobra. It is one of the funniest things I've ever just seen in general because of how weird it is.
Yeah.
Morons! I have morons on my payroll.
I love the 80s Cobra Commander. He was hilarious.
Yeah, but back to what you were actually talking about before I went out spreading the gospel of Ode to Cobra.
Yeah.
I would bet you that it's like how Wrath of Khan was written by a guy who had never seen Star Trek before.
Right.
I bet you that they just sat him down and he did research and watched episodes and read the original series Bible and maybe read some of the comics because he was a comics guy. And I mean, if you take it seriously, a good writer can make a good story out of any series.
Yeah. Very true.
But yeah, so that applies a little more when you're walking into somebody else's story. But having a series Bible in the back of your pocket is just helpful. And part of it is also that whole thing we were talking about when we were talking about power scaling is limitations are greater than powers. If you know what a character will and won't do in advance, that makes it so much easier to write them.
Exactly. Yeah. And when you're figuring out a situation, figuring out a problem that they're going to be in, and then say, okay, well, how are they going to get themselves out of that problem? And then putting limits on what they can and can't do. And, if they, because if you write, if you put some like, it has to be drawn out. There has to be tension. And if you just have them be able to do something that they can figure it out in a second, then it's like, okay, well, that's boring, and okay, I don't want to read the story anymore.
Right. That's a problem with a lot of isekai series where it's like, there's no conflict in this story.
Yes.
All the waifus just like you right away.
Yeah. Yeah, I watched oh God, what's my life as an anime villainess, or my life, whatever. That's
that one like where the girl is the villainess in the dating game.
Yeah.
All paths lead to doom.
Yes, all paths lead to doom. Yeah, and it starts off where she's the villainess, but then she's got to figure out how to not be, to work it so that she doesn't either get exiled or killed.
Correct, because that was all of the endings for the villainess in the game that she had played that she was now living in.
Right. Yeah. And then, so all she does is she gets everybody to love her. Even the heroine of the story loves her.
Yep. Which in that series, because it was a comedy, it was a bit more understandable. Though the last villain was kind of a letdown.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's like, well, if the villain also loves you, okay then.
Yeah, and she solved the problem very, very quickly.
Yep. Which again, because it's a comedy, in my mind, like the most of the comedy came from the fact that she didn't actually realize that she had diverged the timeline enough that she didn't have to worry anymore.
Right.
But yeah, and Torino brings up another one. Overlord. It's like, oh, I'm Eins und Gone, and I'm 50 levels higher than everything else in this world. Aren't I amazing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that's why, and this was like what my friends and I who were watching that series, this is what I started realizing is that, oh, I see. We love watching the little interactions of the evil villain court, but we love that, but they can't have them around all the time because they just would squash every single problem flat.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you have to do things like focus on lizard people for a little bit, or focus on like one of the butlers who's himself absurdly powerful already, but less absurdly powerful, saving this blonde girl. And it's like I enjoyed those stories, but I also understand all the people who said, I came here to watch anime Skeletor. Why isn't anime Skeletor doing awesome things?
Yeah. Oh, jeez.
But yeah, that's and yeah, that was also a key thing in my mind in the outline process was what like that's part of why I wrote things down too about like who is this character, what makes her tick, because there are some secondary characters that you realize that you don't actually have enough meat on the bone to tell the story about them.
Mm-hmm.
Rose, I found that she had enough insecurities, neuroses, and character flaws to be really interesting to write her perspective on things.
Yeah, and those are always fun characters to write.
Yeah, like Rose is the one who will accidentally tell a racist joke at a party, but then be extremely guilty about it once she realizes, oh shit, that was an extremely racist joke and I didn't mean it.
Yeah. Just as long as she doesn't use the gamer word.
Well, yeah. No, that no, thank you. I don't care to be banned.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's got to remember, hey, the main character. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the other thing is that the Overlord kind of felt like it wanted to have its cake and eat it too. It's like, oh, we're the good guys, but also we're villains.
Yeah. Yeah, and that go back to I guess Sword Art Online can be considered an isekai.
It's interesting because it's like a VR isekai almost.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because like that's the trope maker that everybody was copying, but it was so unlike everything else. It's like everybody said, hey, I like this concept, but what if it was a real fantasy world?
Yeah. Yeah, and then you had like Konosuba.
And Konosuba, like I swear you could take the cast of Konosuba and actually put them in a serious story and it would work because you'd have enough to work with.
Yeah.
Actually, I guess you do technically have the cast of Konosuba have serious things happen pretty frequently. So
yeah. Yeah, it's always oh shoot, I'm having a Joe Biden moment. Why did I stop? But yeah, I still feel guilty about the anime cringe that I clipped that I did with Micah from Konosuba. I don't know if you saw that.
There were so many anime cringes I didn't. But I can definitely think of a few cringe Konosuba moments to inflict on people.
Yeah. Well, I inflicted one on Micah and Hatman, and it affected Micah so badly that he ended the stream right after.
Wow.
After he won.
I was always kind of weird in that I had fun with the anime cringe, and that I actually was like, what would be something that they would find enjoyable? Which is not the point of the anime cringe, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
'Cause I always get more joy out of like making people find interesting things that they hadn't encountered before.
Right.
I guess I'm too soft.
Yeah.
Well, so to summarize what we've been talking about, because we're coming up on the end of the hour.
Yes.
Planning is good. Planning avoids wasted work. Measure twice, cut once.
Yes.
Don't think that you have to get it perfect the first time, but you want to make sure you're at least in the ballpark. And so notes can definitely help you with that. Notes can help you keep track of things. Because there are some details I didn't put in my notes that I occasionally have to pull up one of my past books and do a Control F for that word, which is very inefficient. Like how many brothers did Rose have? What did I say Soren's mother's last name was?
Yeah.
So it's like you can make it up in the moment, but it's like added to the notes.
Right. And just to reiterate what I said earlier, find the way of doing it that you're most comfortable with and that works for you, that will help you inevitably finish the story that you want to tell.
Yep. And you know what? Try, if you're in a position where you have some time to experiment, try other people's techniques, even if they don't seem like a good fit for you for a bit, because you may find that like it's kind of like you don't want to just give up on things too easily.
Yeah, it's trial and error. Just
trial and error, but you have to actually try.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right. Well, I think we've thoroughly talked about this subject to the best of our abilities. Bobcat, do you have anything else you would like to say in closing?
Buy his book. Buy his book. Buy his book.
Exactly. Yes. I'll just share the screens again real quick. So, ENGLEWOOD Book 2 on Indiegogo. Link is in the description down below. And, of course, my book as well. If I will get it here. I'm a professional here.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for joining us, Rena and Torino.
Yeah. Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate it. So Angel's Awakening, link is in the description down below. And as well as Bobcat's books. So before we go, I will of course play the trailer for said comic book called Angel's Awakening, and I'm don't know what I'm saying right now.
As is our tradition.
Yes, exactly. All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
The life of a spy isn't as glamorous as I thought. But it isn't dull.